floor of the state Senate. So I'm just going to remind everybody, I had something flowery planned, but I'll just remind everybody that Senator Josh Becker was elected last November to replace Jerry Hill, who had termed out of office. So Josh has kind of taken our breath away. He has really hit the ground running and has introduced an impressive number of progressive bills that are very much of interest to our activist members. So, without any further ado, I give you Senator Josh Becker.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to look around and see so many familiar faces. And if it wasn't COVID, we would be together. And many of you I haven't seen in person in a while. And so it's just great to see everyone. And Greg, it's great to see you. I was just looking through your book this past weekend, and just great to see everybody here. And I know I've been at events with you and heard you talk about healthcare and education and climate change and housing, just looking around at the different people here on this call. And so just really appreciative to have this time with you. And I'm really loving it so far. And it was really nice what Ashley had to say. I think I may have been able to push things back a little bit. So if you want to be a little more flowery, you can, Ashley, but we can also save that to later. Assuming I can stay a little longer, but it looks like I've been able to arrange things. I have 2 bills tomorrow on the floor. So I'm up here in Sacramento. Not on the floor. So I have my last 2 bills in policy committee are tomorrow. One is around water, and one is around transportation. And one of them I'll talk about here tonight. But just to have this opportunity and to work on social justice and work on climate change in Sacramento at this particular time is it's just a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous responsibility, because we're really at a point of historic need and historic opportunity. That's really, we're just, I think we're at a crossroads as a nation, as we, think we recovered from Trump, but now they're, talking again of removing Lynn Cheney, and there's just, more evidence that they're just being obstructionist on the infrastructure plan and everything at the federal level. So we're still, we're at a really crossroads at a country, but we're at a federal level, really crossroads here too, because with the pandemic, we have many people who are suffering. Many people lost their jobs. Many people struggling with housing or worried. I just saw a federal judge overturn some of the rent protections. We're gonna have to look at that, some of the eviction protections. So we're gonna have to look at that again, although the Biden administration is appealing. But with so many Californians that have suffered for food. If any of you have been involved, which I'm sure some of you have, like me, at some of the food drives, and you've seen the lines of cars, lines and lines, cars as far as the eye can see. Diaper giveaways I've done with Baby Basics and Larry and Lisa Moody. You just see the need of people in our community. At the same time, we have, I'm not sure it's a historic surplus, but we're at a point where last year we thought for 2021 we would have a $50 billion deficit at one point, and now we're looking at a $25 billion surplus, and all indications it'll actually be more than that. So I believe we have a moral responsibility to use that surplus to meet the needs of those who've been struggling in our community, whether it be housing, whether it be food, whether it be healthcare. But we can also use that surplus to really set the stage for economic mobility, to try to fix some of the inequality that's been emerged the last 20 years here in our state and in our country. We're now more unequal than in India, believe it or not, with all the issues they're having now, than Vietnam, than Morocco. We have greater income inequality than those countries. And we're have an opportunity here to use this surplus to invest in things like early childhood education and childcare, like higher education and true debt-free higher education. A couple of bills of mine that I'll talk about. We have an opportunity to really invest in ways that will help the kids in this area, but also invest in some big projects throughout the state. Maybe a medical school in Merced. Many of you know I've been involved in UC Merced. There's a huge doctor shortage. Up in the Central Valley, and there's no medical school anywhere nearby, and that's a legacy opportunity, I think, for this governor. So we really have that opportunity. I'm happy to discuss that more in the Q&A and hear some of your ideas for that surplus when we have that discussion. I do have some slides. I thought I'd quickly run through some of my legislation. I think I can just, is it okay? Am I able to share my screen myself, Susie? You think I can?
And Diana, can you give that?
Actually, it does say disabled participant screen sharing. If you could.
Diana has a copy of the slides.
Okay. Okay, great. So got that. Great. If you can make that full screen for folks. Is it possible to enlarge out the frame?
Or make Senator Becker co-host?
Yeah, if you make a co-host, I could do it. I think we do probably want to make it larger.
Do you see it on the top row? Above where it says design, there's that little doohickey.
Okay, so Josh is a co-host now.
Okay.
Susie, you have to stop sharing your screen so he can share his.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I think we can do that.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Okay, that's full screen. People see that? Okay, great. I just want to kind of quickly, maybe for about 10 minutes, kind of run through some of the legislation and, around to make a difference. That's the responsibility from this area. It's an incredible area to represent on the peninsula with all the resources we have, both in terms of really dollars, but really people and the ideas that come from this region. And I really ran to work on these areas, on justice, on education, on climate change, and on equity. And we'll talk about what we're doing. As I say, it's very entrepreneurial. People are surprised sometimes when I say that, because you have to very quickly hire a staff. We hire, I think, we only 13, almost 14 people now. Our district director, Nicole Fernandez, is on tonight, who many of you know, who ran the party here locally, also worked for Jerry Hill, and met her when she worked for Ira Ruskin, many years with just tons of experience. And we're building a really great team together, really proud of that. Garrett Jensen, I think, is also on today, who I met on the campaign, just got his master's at Stanford in education and in policy, and is joining us as well. He's actually up in Sacramento and is on here tonight as well. So really built that team and then said, what do we want to focus on? And one of the immediate things that came up is elections. I know that's something that's very, important to this group. And actually, there was some work done at Stanford by a group of folks that they said they realized actually there's 100,000 votes that had been rejected in the March primary in California. In California, there have been 100,000 votes rejected in the March primary. And a bunch of Stanford law students did some research, and they realized that the registrars were implementing signature verification in different ways in different counties. And so Alex Padilla, at the time, now our senator, he put in some emergency regulations, and we wanted to codify those, as well as actually go a step further and really create the presumption of that it's a valid signature, and you have to prove, really believe beyond reasonable doubt that it's not valid, as opposed to the other way around, create the presumption that it's not valid. And then we really wanted to also increase the amount of ways and the amount of contact that a registrar, if they do have questions about a signature, instead of just an envelope, they can still use that envelope, but now they have to use a basically self-addressed stamped envelope, so it's not another hurdle for someone to reply. They can reach out more than once, but also they can use whatever's on the voter file. They can use the phone number, they can use the email, so they can reach out if they have a question, if a signature is valid. This is obviously very important for seniors. It's very important for disabled, for many other folks in our community, to create the presumption that, yes, their signature counts. So whereas the rest of the country is trying to lower voting, we're actually trying to increase voting, and we saw positive results in November. And so we're really looking to even expand upon that now with this legislation. Second, so that's 503. 504 does really two things. One is that we've all heard about inmates and whether we can restore the right to vote. We just voted in Prop 17 to restore rights on parole. But the problem is the data. This will not surprise some of you, I'm sure, including Greg. The data is not very. The data flows between CDCR, the Corrections Department, and the voting registrars was not very good. So now the voting registrars will get a weekly feed from CDCR, and if somebody is now eligible to vote because they've served their time, they will be told they're eligible, and actually they'll be told how they can re-register or register for the first time. So that's really important to get those folks, make them feel like they're back a part of our society. Of course, we have to get them jobs too, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The second part is allowing military and overseas voters to use the same conditional voter privileges that we have advantage to here. So those are two moving along nicely, and really important from an election perspective, that we expand the number of votes, especially when the rest of the country is working the opposite direction. On justice legislation, two things. First one came to me from the East Palo Alto Community Law Clinic, and you've all heard probably about fees and how, remember in Ferguson, Missouri, after Michael Brown, we learned all about how Ferguson, the whole police department's all funded by fees on poor people. And here we have fees just for civil cases. And we had some waivers in place, but you still had to go to court and do those paperwork and do this whole process just to get the waiver. And these are low-income folks. The whole point is, if they go to court, they may lose their job. They don't have the time off. They may be working multiple jobs. And we should make it easier for them to get these fee waivers. So much of our courts is clogged up with these civil cases, their bankruptcy cases, their eviction cases. 70% of the time people don't have an attorney. People don't realize all that. So we need to make it easy for them to waive these fees. And that's what that one is about. And then the felony murder rule. Felony murder rule, probably some of you know about, used to be if you were, say, driving a car and there was a robbery and someone in the car went in and shot someone, killed someone, even you had nothing to do with it, you would be charged for murder. And it was erroneously thought that this would be a way to deter more violence, and it just never worked. Nancy Skinner did some good work last time. We're having to fix some loopholes that were interpreted by the courts the wrong way, particularly as it applies to attempted murder. And we want to make sure that those people also have the benefits. And if you plead down for murder, it was a weird thing. If you take a plea deal and you and so you were not being charged with murder anymore, but still a very high offense, you could still get 10, 20 years for this, what was essentially vandalism or essentially just driving your car, and made no sense. So this is a cleanup of the felony murder loophole, and really, really important. Actually, the Mercury News had a big story about this, not even mentioning the problem of the felony murder rule and the ongoing issues. So we're cleaning that up. On the education front, a couple things we'll highlight. One came to us from the San Mateo Community College District, and they wanted better flexibility to meet the students' full cost of attendance. There's something called the Promise Scholars Program that you may know about. Great program. It pays more than just enrollment fees. It pays for books. It pays for transportation. I believe it can pay for food in certain cases. And there's actually 6,000 kids who qualify for that. I say kids, but students who qualify. Only 2,000 are they able to serve, even though they've got plenty of reserves. Our community college district is actually flush with money, and they want to use the money to help these students, but by law, they're not allowed to, and that's why they came to us with this fix that we're working on, going well so far. The second, actually, our lead witness was from San Mateo County Office of Education, the CTO there, and it also comes from San Mateo County, John Crandon, who many of you may know, and John Cradler and Ruth Mary Cradler. I don't know if you know them, but they live in San Mateo, and they had done a lot of work in this, and we're close with Tony Thurmond, and when Jerry Brown did the LCFF, local control funding formula, got rid of all categoricals, and that was good in some sense, cleaned up a lot of things, but technology was one of those things that kind of got left behind because there was no program now, specific program to help schools with technology. And so this will do this on a regional basis. And it's really a regional network of technical assistance to schools and school districts, and really teacher training. That's really what this is about. It's less about, laptops for kids. It's really about teacher training, making sure the teachers stepped in. We all know how important that is right now in schools. And then I want to spend a few more minutes, maybe a little more in depth, talking about climate here in California, because I know many of you care deeply about this. This is a picture of our climate emissions. This is the big picture of our climate emissions. And as you can see the electricity part here, industrial, transportation, ag, and then really the building sector. And so what we've really took a kind of a systematic approach to this, and we're just saying, okay, we have to tackle all the major sources of carbon. We got to just tackle each one. So we have 5 bills in climate. We have Helen Walter, who some of you know, formerly Committee for Green Foothills, is working for us locally, and then Ken Branson. She lives locally, but he's going to be full-time in Sacramento working on climate. Really a terrific experience. And so, we're probably going to triple our electricity use in the next 20 to 25 years here in California, triple our electricity use. Why? Because of everyone's, if we're going to electrify our transportation and we'll electrify buildings, which we're starting to do, that is going to additional electrical use. So, and that's changing also the shape of our energy load. The peak is now between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. when people are coming home, they're plugging in their cars, and that's really when the peak is. And especially for 4 or 5 months when the sun is not shining during that time, but even into times like this, we've got to really dramatically ramp up those peaker plants whenever that sun starts going down. And so we're now mostly clean energy, say from 11, 12, 1 o'clock, but we're mostly fossil fuels from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in that peak. And so that's where we're pushing this 24/7 clean energy standard to go from an annual accounting of renewable energy credits, because we have renewable portfolio standard, renewable energy credits on an annual basis, to hourly accounting of clean energy, and then match that so we can match supply with demand and really attack that evening peak and set some interim targets. So this is a really big, ambitious bill. This will be the first time ever in the US where we have an hourly accounting as opposed to this kind of annual matching of RECs. And so, the utilities obviously we're not happy about it. So they, we've sort of made that one into a 2-year bill. And so I'm still optimistic about getting it through next year, but that one has been delayed, unfortunately. But we've got a lot of good support. Peninsula Clean Energy, we really got the idea from them. That is a stated part of their business plan is to get to 24/7 clean energy. And so they're supporting Silicon Valley Clean Energy. They're really the only ones in the state from load serving entities that were supportive. So we need to keep doing additional work, but we're never going to reach our goals unless we hit that peak. Some of the things I'm co-author, so we're permitting and streamlining offshore wind and long duration storage, both of which will be, our 24/7 bill will help enable, but there's some specific bills there too. Transportation, again, as we know, a massive part of our carbon or GHG emissions. One of my bills tomorrow is a used EV sales tax exclusion. So we have to be able to get EVs, and actually I believe high mileage hybrids as well, to lower income populations, right? That's really where we need it, that they're adopting at a much slower rate. And many times there's issues. And so we're pushing also, we have a letter working on today to get EV charging in multifamily residential and EV charging at work, because not everyone's going to be able to charge at home. And so there's lots and lots of issues to tackle, but one of them is the cost. And so we're really trying to promote used EVs to lower income populations. The governor's has a plan for $1.5 billion in EV infrastructure spending. That's a massive amount, and but it's really only a step on what's needed to increase the number of charging stations if we are going to electrify at the rate that we need to. Then we've got buildings. Again, 10% of our GHG emissions from residential and commercial buildings. I have a bill, SB 68, that passed out of committee, that's reducing barriers to electrification. Daniel Yost, some of you may know, former mayor of Woodside, came to us with this one. And many times people want to do an electric heat pump, or they buy an electric vehicle and they need to upgrade their electrical panel. One, we want to give them information. Oftentimes you don't actually have to upgrade the panel. So there's a lot more you can do. So we've education around that, number one. Two, we have so education for one. Two, technical research through the EPIC program at the CEC to allow some additional technology research into this building electrification, some of these issues. And then thirdly, really a service level agreement, which the utilities are trying to kill out of the bill, but we're going to keep in, which is that they have to respond in a certain amount of time, because a lot of times that's delaying people and they give up because they need a new hot water heater, they need a new furnace. They're not going to wait for an all electric heat pump if it's going to be 6 months. And we have to stop that waiting game there. So that's what we're doing with 68. And then 345 is something with the Green Lining Institute. As you may know, it's really one of the major environmental justice and really economic justice organizations too up in Sacramento. And there's $1 billion a year, $1 billion that we collect in what are called public purpose charges. And again, they're collected for a public purpose. And so they're really used, meant to support energy efficiency and distributed generation. The problem is low income folks, disadvantaged communities, they're not getting their share of that money. And so we would expand and allow them to look at not just impacts on the grid for this public purpose charges, but also what they call non-energy benefits, which is, say, reducing someone's electricity bills. And so this will allow low-income communities to get a much bigger share of that $1 billion, which is we're already collecting for public purpose charges. Senator Cortese has some very ambitious decarb bills. They're meeting some stiff headwinds, but I'm certainly supporting him there. And then again, a lot of this, what I've learned is that, there's our work in the legislature, but there's also our work with the agencies. Had a call yesterday with Danny Cullenward, some of you may know from Stanford. He's done a lot of research. It turns out cap and trade, unfortunately, that we all pushed for it, just the offsets is a disaster. It's just a boon to industry. they're getting to take all these offsets, which are just really not doing anything. And it's just a real shame. And we need to get CARB to change this. It's going to be a big fight. And so that's not really a bill. It's just trying to advocate within CARB. I've already set up an appointment with Davina Hurt. And if she's going to be appointed to CARB. So we got to, meet with her and try to get her to be an advocate, because it's going to be, we have a new leader CARB. And so, that's kind of advocacy that needs to be done to make sure that we don't let these bogus offsets. And you can Google it, and it's really unfortunate. If you search Danny Cullenward, which is like Cullenward, and just something we have to change. And so those are the kinds of things that are behind the scenes. Another thing I was working on today, many of you know that Diablo Canyon is actually 7% of our electricity. It's clean, it's nuclear. A lot of people don't like nuclear, and we are shutting it down for a good reason, but it was 7% clean energy, or is 7% clean energy of our total electricity use, and it's also a base load energy source. And so the PUC agreed they would replace that with clean energy. Unfortunately, they're not on track to do that. And this gets to what's called the IRP, the their planning process, and how many megatons are they planning for? And they have to, right now, the allowances, they looked at different scenarios and they picked one that allows way too much GHG emissions, especially it will play in really negatively in this situation with Diablo Canyon. So I'm working on a letter today on that. We may, with Friends of the Earth and others, and we may have to go public on that, because PUC is not doing what it needs to do to make sure, and because that could be a giant step backward. All of a sudden, that 7% clean energy that now is, could be replaced by fossil fuels. So we got a lot of work to do on climate, and I'm excited. The last area that I'll talk about is the industrial sector. And if you've read Bill Gates's book, you've seen that cement is 7% of the world's carbon emissions. And really, no one's really been able to tackle it. We believe we can tackle it here in California. There are some promising ways of doing low carbon concrete. One of our witnesses was one of the X Prize winners. You've heard about the X Prize, which was how to make, they did a 5-year prize around which team could make things out of carbon. And 2 of the winners were people that were taking the process emissions from concrete, from cement, which is 60% of the emissions, the process emissions, and injecting that back in to the concrete and sort of trapping it there. So we're going to zero out those emissions by 2045. And we're now in the, we're setting those interim goals, basically get to 40% by 2030, 60% by 2035. And then we're going to combine this concrete. The Buy Clean California piece was a piece that Rob Bonta was doing. You guys know Rob, who's now the Attorney General. So that bill was sort of orphaned and actually fits really nicely with our bill. So we're going to incorporate that Buy Clean, which is a framework we have here in California now, to encourage not encourage and require that the government, for all of our billions in spending, that we buy clean products. And that it already has a steel provision for steel, but concrete was not in there, and so we're going to extend that framework. So we'll have that strong market signal, I think, in a couple of ways. The fracking ban, unfortunately, went down. You've seen that. Longer story if we want to discuss, what happened there. Happy to do so. So. That's really it. I mean, I have details on each of those things, and I won't really take a lot of time now, but you can see what I was talking about, this curve here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this darker line is our fossil fuel use. And so it goes way down between 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, and then it ramps up really sharply. This was March 4th. So almost all of our peak energy is from fossil fuels. And that's why we have to match it, as I said, and set some interim targets so that we can really get to 100%. There's a loophole too, where SB 100, unfortunately, has been interpreted as 100% of retail sales, which is not 100% of all energy use. It's really about 85%. And so we have to clarify that 100% really means 100% as well. Here's our electrification bill. As I mentioned, oftentimes the contractors lacked experience. People are told to upgrade electrical service when they don't need it, long delays, and then there's poor service when trying to upgrade. And therefore, our solution is better information, better technology, and these service level standards that I mentioned. The sales tax exemption up tomorrow, transportation about 50% of the emissions. So we have to tackle it. And this is a step, part of that big picture to tackle transportation. And then the non-energy benefits bill that I mentioned to make sure low-income disadvantaged communities get the resources to adopt energy efficiency and distributed energy technology programs. Finally, the low carbon concrete, as I said, it's our most widely used building material. I've now seen Scientific America had a story. So all man-made things in the history of the world, 50% is concrete. And we're going to increase our use of it by 40% here in California. So we have to get to net zero emissions as fast as possible. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and we can open up for Q&A. And I've gotten text so far that I'm able to stay later, so we can keep on going.
Oh, that's terrific. If anybody wants to raise a hand that they've got a question, I want to say, for one, that your slide showing the picture there, the big picture, was fabulous. I just really appreciated seeing that, especially with all of the bills associated, because that's kind of my area. That's my little piece. So
yeah, it's
who do
important.
I have?
There's so many dimensions. You got to really look at it, because otherwise you think you're solving the problem, but there's that you're only doing a small piece. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Who do we? I didn't quite watch who was up first, so I'm going to put Greg up first. And you're muted.
Sorry, Josh, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Greg.
Hi. Listen, I didn't understand the advantage of the hourly true-up as opposed to the annual true-up. As a matter of fact, it seems counterproductive, because during the day in the summer, if you true up every hour, then there's no advantage of producing solar power. And then at night, you don't produce any, so it's all to your disadvantage. So where is the advantage?
So the advantage is that right now, if you're a load-serving entity, your basic incentive is to buy solar, which is great. Solar is the cheapest thing out there now, which is great. Unfortunately, we've seen solar doesn't help. The storage is not there yet. We need to invest in the storage, but the storage is not there yet. So from that peak, from that 4 to 9 slot, right? If I shared that other slide, when you saw our energy goes way up, that's all fossil fuels now, right? And right now, you could say as a company, or even our CCAs say, hey, we're 100% renewable energy, and that sounds great, and they're not trying to be misleading. But what that means is they're still burning a ton of fossil fuels, right? For that peak, it's still all fossil fuels, but then they're able to buy renewable energy credits, right? So on an annual basis, you're 100% because you're only tracking on an annual basis, but actually you're burning lots of fossil fuels. So the challenge is to go from 100% renewable energy, which is, again, it's positive, but I was told to get from that to 24/7 clean energy is like going from kindergarten to grad school. I mean, it's that big a gap. And so the only way to do it is so our approach is to say, hey, utilities, you have to be 60% clean in that peak that I showed you, that 4 to 9 o'clock time slot. You have to be 60% clean by 2030. But to do that, we have to actually track on an hourly basis. Otherwise, you can't, you can't know. We just need better information about when they're buying the renewable energy, and we need better information about, what are they using, right, during that time. And so if we track clean energy on an hourly basis, we can match the clean energy generated with the needs. And that's really the goal, because until we do that, again, we're would just still be burning tons of fossil fuels. And so the hope is, that this bill will basically require the utilities to go off and then invest in things to fit that peak in addition to solar. So that could be geothermal, that could be offshore wind, that could be long duration storage, it could be demand response. But it will require them to go out and invest in things other than solar to meet that peak. So hopefully that makes sense. And I can talk more about it. I want to kind of bore everyone, but that's really the rationale.
Well, I have to say that I just looked into putting solar on my house in addition to a heat pump, and I reached exactly the opposite conclusion that you reached, because if you true up at the end of the year, then what you produce during the day means that during the day, if you produce more solar on your roof, the utility, PG&E in our case, can turn down all the gas, so that they would not. If the true up is much better if it's over 24 hours, or actually over a year. Then anyway, we have to discuss this one-on-one, because I don't reach that conclusion at all.
Yeah, let's see. I'll just show this slide one more time again, we can talk more about it. But yeah, if you're producing solar, that's great. It's less fossil fuels they need during the day. But again, if you look at this chart here that I showed, and if you look at this dark line, this is sort of called the net demand, right? Which is really essentially, this dark line is our fossil fuel use. So as you see, our fossil fuel use on March 4th in California went way down during the day, right? Because we're producing lots of solar. Unfortunately, the solar didn't help us once it got to be 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock here, right? At 19, that's 7 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, we're using all fossil fuels, right? Because the sun has gone down and just the storage is not there yet. So that's why it's great. We can keep doing more solar. It'll help us here, and we'll have some batteries, and it'll help us a little bit here. But we really have to attack this peak, and that's what this bill is trying to do, to say, hey, utilities, you have to invest in things in addition to solar. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. If not, I'm happy to talk about it offline.
Okay.
All right. Well, the next question comes from Nancy Goodban.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you for this. This is great to get a rundown of your bills. My questions were about the criminal legal system. Basically, a lot of us are concerned that the sheriff here turns people over to ICE, maybe at the rate of about 1 a week, but we don't really know because he won't say. There's no transparency. So I had 2 questions about bills, one Senate and one Assembly. Do you support SB 271, Scott Wiener's bill, that would allow sheriffs to run for office without being law enforcement certified?
That's an interesting one. I have not looked at one. Yeah, I think we would support. One thing you realize is just once you're actually up here, there's just so many bills. So I think I have heard about that one. It hasn't come in front of me yet. But yeah, I don't see any reason why I would not support that one. Yeah.
Apparently, until 1989, anyone could run for sheriff. And then this guy Hennessy ran in San Francisco, and he was so progressive that the Sheriff's Association lobbied the legislature to make it illegal for a regular attorney or social worker to run for sheriff. And you had to have gone through the 6-month, post-training, the peace officer standards and training post-classes academy to become a cop in order to be a sheriff. So it's basically, let's say, turning back the clock to 1989.
Yeah,
well,
interesting. Okay, we'll look at that one. Thank you.
That would make a lot of difference in a lot of counties, because we're trying to figure out who might run. The second one, and it's also a quick one, and you might not have an opinion because I think it's just been through the Assembly Public Safety and Justice Committee, but it's AB 937. It's called the Vision Act, and it would pretty much close the loophole in the California Sanctuary Act, the California Values Act, which says that law enforcement can't turn people over to ICE unless they've committed some serious and violent felony. There's about 500 on that list. It's all really hard to interpret. So some places like, San Francisco, Santa Clara County, I think Los Angeles County, don't turn anyone over to ICE, but we do. The Vision Act would get rid of that loophole and say sheriffs can't turn people over to ICE. That's it, unless there's a court order. There's never a court order. That's like,
No, I appreciate it. I'm strongly supportive of that. Yes.
oh, so that
Yeah.
again, I will tell our San Mateo County Coalition for Immigrant Rights, and we will be so happy. And thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
All
I
right.
was gonna say one last thing on Greg's. We're not going to go back to it, but I'm saying I'm not telling anyone not to get solar. I have solar as well. Like I said, we're going to triple our electricity use, so we're definitely going to need all the solar we can get. But we also have to require the utilities to invest in these other, these other things to serve those hard to serve times of the day when the sun goes down. So anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. But yeah, next question.
All right. The next question comes from Elsa.
Hey, Elsa.
Hey, I just want to make a quick comment. Okay, we knew you were a progressive going into this, and we're impressed with all the bills you've introduced. And but I'm impressed with what a policy wonk you are, because that's exactly our kind of guy. So I just wanted to say I'm very impressed.
Thank you. That means a lot from you and from this group. And that's really my, and I don't know if, not everyone knew me that well in the campaign, but that's really, that, is who I am. So I'm really glad. Thank you for that.
All right, Elsa, you're up.
Thanks. Josh, I am so blown away. There's no grass growing under your feet. Not that you would go for grass anyway. But I don't think we have ever seen such an array of bills so fast from, I don't think in the history of the country we've ever heard of this. And just that you've had this pipeline growing, obviously, for so long is so outstanding. But it engendered all of these other questions too. And I wondered how far away solar storage is and whether you think wind can be one of those really good alternate times of the day options if we get to do offshore. And I have two other quick things.
Let me answer those two before I forget, and then I'll get the other ones.
Good.
So offshore wind for sure. Yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to push with this bill, because offshore wind will serve that nighttime. Onshore wind, not as much, right? The onshore wind, sometimes we start to see it go down. The production oftentimes does go down at night. So, but offshore wind for sure. And storage, absolutely. It's just, it's going to take a while, the batteries that people can put on their phone, great. That's all helpful. But we're not going to get there without some really significant long duration storage. And it has to be, can't even be 4 hours, right? And batteries are mostly like 3-4 hours. We're going to have times where we go through a week of conditions where we need that storage. And again, that's what this bill is slated to do. Without picking a winner, for example, in a technology, to say, hey, you have to invest in things like that, and you figure out which is the best one.
Yeah, I can't wait till we've got wind. That's going to be fabulous. I'm going to switch to healthcare for a minute now, knowing that AB 1400 just became a 2-year bill, which in my mind tends to have a history of, oh, it's going to go to the graveyard. And not that it was a slam dunk to begin with either. But from your perspective in the Senate, how do you look at a bill becoming, going from 1 to 2? How do you look particularly at AB 1400 and its feasibility at some point in time? And how much do you think it's not having the income streams delineated helped kill it?
Well,
I shouldn't say kill, but
yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, sometimes a very complex bill, I'm told does become a 2-year bill, and that gives it more time and more, like my 24/7 bill, like we were discussing with Greg. It's not, it is complicated. It's ambitious. It's complicated. Yeah. Okay. Maybe, I think there's some people who legitimately said, hey, let's make it a 2-year bill so we can study it and take more time and da-da-da. And same thing with 1400. So I think some people legitimately say, yeah, this is complicated. Let's get more time. Some people want to just delay it to kill it, right? So it'll be hard to say on 1400. I mean, I have to say, and this group's been great, and Lynn in particular, and really educating me. And then, I read The Healing of America, which is an incredible book, just, and learning about the different systems around the world, and essentially the 4 models, right? There's the the pure government-run model that Britain has. There's the Medicare, what they call it Medicare in Canada, right? That's what we're really looking for, a single payer, where the doctors are private, but the government is the single payer. We have that too in the United States with Medicare. And then there's the what they call the Bismarck model, which are what France, Germany, Japan have in various forms, where they've got actually for-profit doctors, private doctors, also private insurance, but it's nonprofit, right? And our problems, I think, are really twofold. One, we have one of every system. We've got the pure socialist system in the form of our VA. We've got the Medicare system in the form of Medicare. And then for everyone else, we've got some variation of the Bismarck model, where we've got government, we've got, worker, employer supplied healthcare. But we're the only one in the whole world that is for-profit health insurance. And it's just the only developed country is for-profit health insurance. And it makes no sense. Our Medicare is like 3% administrative costs, and for-profit health insurance has a 10 to 15% profit margin, built in. It just goes right to profit. So we're the only ones. And so I've just been, learning and learning. It's just making me more adamant about trying to get 1400 done, because it makes no sense. We're the only country that has this disputing, insurance companies can dispute bills. In every other country, they have to pay the bills. Basic level of coverage is for everybody. Whether they have that model, whether they have the pure, British model, where the doctors are employed, by the government and insurance is paid by the government, or whether they have the French or German or Japan model, or Switzerland switched in '94 when Clinton was trying. Switzerland switched to a very similar model, right, where they're closest to us, and they've got where they have some private insurers and they have private doctors. But again, it's not for profit. It's not for profit insurance, and bills are not disputed. And you get a bill, you pay it, and there's everybody has health care. So it's just an imperative at every level for our country. Just we waste so much money and we have the worst outcomes, and it's just makes no sense. So I know Ash is committed, but
so Josh, if clearly you're going to have solved the climate crisis by the end of this year, I've never seen such a panoply. So we'd love to have you dedicated to healthcare next year. That would be fabulous. But you mentioned Switzerland. It is the second most expensive country in the world per capita. That too is interesting as they try and get near us.
Right, they're really most similar to us, but they still at least they cover everyone, and at least they're not wasting all the money in for-profit health insurance. But yes, it's similar. It's the second most expensive. Correct. Yes.
There's a Taiwan physician who helped unroll their fabulous healthcare system, who met with Anna Eshoo recently and Anna said, yeah, but we like competition in this country. And he said, the weird thing is, why are we competing on the price of insurance instead of on the quality of care a provider gives you? And I just thought that was it. Yeah. Thank you, Josh, so much. We are so thrilled.
Yeah.
All right. And next question coming up from Gail.
Oh, yeah, I always forget. Hi, Josh. It was nice to see you on the street in Palo Alto standing up for immigrant kids, and also in Redwood City standing up for immigrants, for Asian immigrants. This time, I would like to just mention that in the past, this club has studied water issues in great detail, and we are fully in support of Restore the Delta, and not in support of big agribusiness in the Central Valley. But that said, I would like to ask about 3 bills that relate to the criminal legal system. One of them is called the Promise Act, which would require that funds for helping youth stay out of trouble would actually be used for services to help youth. It's currently mostly being used for probation, which is not what it's supposed to be. That's SB 493. Might not have come across your desk. The other is something to clean up and remove the rest of, or almost all the rest of the criminal legal fees, which can be so burdensome. We already removed quite a few in the state, but a lot got passed over, and that's SB 586. And this club is really in support of removing criminal legal fees that are so burdensome to people who are often unemployed and heavily in debt. And finally, the one that's probably the most controversial, and we'd love to hear what you have to say, that is SB 2, which would allow decertification of police, of officers, I guess, of all sorts, for serious offenses. And it would provide a whole system for certifying and decertifying. And it would, I think, allow for a lot more uniformity and transparency, and help remove people not being accountable.
Yeah. No, thank you. So it's on the last one, which is one of the big ones. This session didn't get through last time. So Senator Bradford is a friend. He actually stays here at the Sheraton. So I was hanging out with him late last night with former Speaker John Perez. Yeah, I'm supportive. I think, there's some work that has to be done on it to get it through, and so, but I'll be working with him on it, and I want to help him get it through. So no question on that one. On the other two, yeah, if you could put them in chat or send it, because Garrett's on here who does criminal justice with us, and we will look at both. Certainly the fee one sounds very complimentary to my bill, which is about civil fees. So we'll take a look at that for sure. If we haven't, Garrett may have already seen that one.
Okay, I'll use email.
Okay, sure. And then, but yeah, in the juvenile justice, that first one, we'd love to hear about it, because I'm very focused. And I remember being at one of our last in-person gathering when we had the campaign debate with this group. And I just got back from Defy Ventures, right? I just gotten back from the prison at Soledad State Prison with Defy Ventures. And I was kind of, all worked up about that. And one of my first bill, some of you may saw it, my first bill, which was not on the slides, my first bill that passed the floor this week was about supporting what we call earn and learn models. So these are models that they do skills-based training while they employ people who have barriers to employment. In many cases, that's people who are coming out of the justice system. And those are groups like, actually Job Train here locally. There's some of that. Homeboy Industries is one that Garrett loves. It's just fun to read about. They have 600 formerly incarcerated and former gang members that they employ in jobs making products while they train them. Goodwill has 19,000 employees. 85% of them have barriers to employment. So that was my first bill to get more funding for those kinds of models. So thank you. We will take a look at the ones that you mentioned.
All right, and next up is Bill.
Hi, Josh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Josh. Thanks so much for being here tonight. It's my first chance to talk to my new Senate representative. I'm so happy and so proud to have you. My question is not so much around pending legislation, although actually one thing is kind of related to that. It's not pending, it's something that became law, but could lead to some other legislation. And that is simply, and you're perhaps hopefully aware of some of this, but there's a growing concern both nationally and locally with police department units. And specifically here, it's the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the history of the last couple of years, but for example, Nancy can tell you about all of the public hearings that we've held, we've spoken at with the county board and with the sheriff around the treatment of immigrants and ICE. And she touched on that already tonight. But the concern I want to raise tonight is the number of recent police killings. And some of them you may be aware of. One of the more prominent ones was, if I hope I'm saying this right, was Shanae Wakobi up in Millbrae a couple years back. We also had a very tragic death in Redwood City of Kyle Hart, who was a public school teacher in Palo Alto and a citizen of Redwood City. And most recently, Roger Allen, I'm sorry, up in Daly City. And in at least two of these cases, there was no cameras, body-worn cameras like there should be. Daly City and Redwood City right now are the only two cities that don't have it. I know Redwood City is about to get it implemented, but unfortunately at the time of that shooting a couple of years back, they didn't have any. My question simply is how much you're aware of this and what on the state level can you do to help us, because we're really at a frustrating level, particularly with regards to the county for accountability. Perhaps you know about AB 1185 that became law that allows for a public advisory committee to be created. But to date, we've run into a lot of frustration with public officials in San Mateo County.
Yeah, well, please, yeah, let's follow up on this, and Garrett, and we'll figure out who also from the district can help out. Because obviously now I'm looking more at the state level and the county level. I did weigh in. There's a juvenile justice issue, and the question is, we're really trying to shut down that system. And David Canepa was the only one who sort of voted against this. I wrote a letter on this on a hearing they had about a month or so ago, and it's an issue whether they were going to transfer other kids to be in the remaining juvenile facilities that we have, and so.
Excuse me, Josh. I appreciate what you're saying, but the point I'm trying to make goes more to the county, the sheriff's office, their conduct, and the fact that lives are being lost here. We're talking about adult lives now.
Yeah.
What we want to as citizens, as a community, as citizens of San Mateo County, we want to be able to feel like we have more of a voice, and quite frankly, we want to feel more secure and safe. And so these are concerns that are becoming bigger and bigger within our county.
Yeah, and I hear you. And I think the question is, what can we do? I want to be supportive. I know, after the murder of George Floyd, I did communicate with the sheriff, and they did publicize, their manual and the 8 can't wait, initial 8 reforms that we were all pushing. I believe they've now implemented all of them, though I think we've seen now that that's just a start, right? And, I may know I ran a legal tech accelerator, and one of the things we had was a very young woman started coming to help police departments go through. Now we have millions, and public defenders, go through the tens of thousands of hours of video now that we have from all these body cams to find that right footage that can help in a case. These public defenders are often understaffed, and that's one way of actually holding police departments accountable. But it's I don't have a simple answer for you. Certainly if it's because this is what obviously we've seen this across the country. I mean, that was the unbelievable thing about the George Floyd and the Derek Chauvin trial, was that in the 3-day, from the start of the trial to the verdict, every day at least three people were killed by police across the country. I mean, it's just
right. In our case, this was history prior to George Floyd.
Yeah. And I know a little bit about some of those cases, not all of them, but I think there's ways to sort of push for more transparency. I mean, I've personally found the sheriff, I find him, responsive, but if you don't, and if there's things we can push him for, happy to weigh in on that. But it's.
I guess my point is we've got AB 1185, which was codified into law, I believe. I don't know the number. Dale can maybe help me out on that. But, that's one thing that we have as perhaps a tool right now, but we haven't really been able to make much use of it in San Mateo County. And so we're struggling with how best to to deal with this. And it looks to me like right now what we're hearing is, well, maybe we have to think about the next election for sheriff.
Well,
Yeah.
that is coming up. And there might be a DA's race, right? You know, for the first time in forever here too. That'll also help us. But yeah, I don't know about 1185. Maybe we can do a follow-up. But Nicole, as I mentioned, who's on the line, my district director, maybe we could do a follow-up on 1185 and just brainstorm with you what can be done.
I don't know if Gail wants to speak to it, but it was codified into law, and I don't recall the specific number.
Okay.
I'm looking at right now, AB 1185. Yeah, from the last year.
Bill, can you drop, this is Nicole, can you drop me and Garrett an email? Our emails are in the chat and we can follow up and discuss this, please.
I got your email, Nicole.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, the board can create an oversight body and the voters can vote one in, but to get that to happen would require a tremendous amount of work and gathering signatures and, you know, funding for all of that. That's a very heavy lift for at present and not a huge number of activists. But I think that if the public knew more about what was going on, they would probably be supportive.
And there's a small group of us who are thinking maybe it's worth having a citizens initiative. Gail and I met today with San Francisco's Board of Supervisor aide that sponsored that initiative that they had in San Francisco to create an oversight body under AB 1185. The law doesn't allow you to tell the sheriff what to do, but it allows you to create a body that can subpoena witnesses, can sit in on disciplinary hearings, can gather any kinds of data they want, can look inside the databases and make recommendations to the sheriff. Sheriff might not do anything, but our question is it worth at least, like Gail said, highlighting these issues? And the Board of Supervisors in our county is not going to take action on that, so the citizens would have to.
Yeah. Well, I think also, you know, Joseph Marshall might be, you know, I did after George Floyd's murder, I did a town hall and I had Joe Marshall, and he's an amazing guy. He's actually a MacArthur Genius Grant winner, award winner. And he was on the police oversight board in San Francisco for many years. And so, you know, he might be someone to talk to. So I could try to set that up.
What was his name again, Josh?
Dr. Joseph Marshall.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great guy.
So I think between Bill and Gail and I were all kind of on the same page on this, so we'll email you and follow up.
Great.
And I just have to stop right now because it's after 8. And Josh, do you have a few more minutes, or have you got?
Maybe we can get the last two questions together, and I could just try to touch on them quickly. Is that okay?
All right, sure. Jim, you're up.
Right now, I'm still okay. I have not been called away yet. So.
Okay, Jim, you're up next.
I'm actually Jim, not Nancy, it shows up on the label. Nancy and I are exchanging Zoom sessions tonight. Back to climate change. My concern, and you may not want to totally answer this, but I'm concerned with all the things that need to be done, particularly in Northern California, that involve PG&E, and in particular, the fact that the Diablo Canyon facility, which my data says is providing close to 40% of PG&E's Northern California requirements, is going to be closing down in 2025-26. And along with their bankruptcy, their fire issues, et cetera, are they strong enough to deal with the issues we're facing, or does the state need to take more action to oversee and maybe even partially manage what's going on? I just don't have a lot of confidence where PG&E is these days, given the magnitude of the issues we're facing.
Thank you, Jim. Let's hear Marshall's question, and then I'll answer.
I have actually two quick questions. I'm not sure the answers are quick, but I'll make them quick questions. The first one is about a follow-up on the healthcare. But because we have very large, powerful for-profit healthcare insurance companies that are extremely powerful and also have a lot of personnel, What's the prospective thinking about how to deal with the transition of these insurance companies that won't be for profit? How is that going to actually happen with all these people going out of work? How will that be managed? Will they become the nonprofit managers or some other program? And the second quick question, which also has a longer answer, and this is about the environment. So I really appreciate, the fact that you have this amazing understanding of the urgency of the climate issue. It's a crisis. And unfortunately, I got in a little late, so you may have already answered this. But do your bills have provisions for environmental justice solutions as part of those bills?
Yeah. Well, last one's easy. Yes, I do. All of them have that as a component, but a couple specifically tomorrow. One that's up is around used EVs, basically eliminating the sales tax, which is significant. It's like $1,800. So basically, it's all about getting used EVs and used high mileage hybrids into the hands of lower income populations. And then I've got a whole bill, which is all around, I told everyone about this $1 billion in public purpose charges that utilities collect on our bill, and making sure that lower income and disadvantaged neighborhoods benefit from that money, which is supposed to go towards energy efficiency projects, distributed energy generation, and they're not benefiting from it. So yes, a big focus. In terms of your other one, and then I've got Jim's on PG&E. I'll just stick with Jim's first on PG&E. The good news is that Jerry Hill left us in a great position with PG&E, because we sort of have essentially the sword of Damocles hanging over their head, because we've now done everything. He's already put the legislation in place to create to basically make it a public utility, and with the provision that if they screw up again, which is defined, if there's another big fire that they cause, or they go bankrupt again, or another big, one other situation, then that gets executed and the government takes over. So they have that hanging over their head. The good news is they have actually finally taken some steps to reform. They have an entirely new team. I've heard good things about the woman in charge. We know a couple people on the board. One I've known for 25 years in clean energy. One of them is married to Kavita Tonka, actually was on the council in Los Altos Hills. So they've got some new board members. They've got entirely new leadership. And there really is a, oops, 1 second, I'll come right back. I'd say there is hope. I mean, Diablo Canyon is a big deal, as I talked about, and that's why I'm writing to the PUC on that. And they told me actually confidentially that my assessment, our 24/7 clean energy bill, they agree that's really the direction that we need to go. We need to, start tackling that peak. So I'd say there's some hope for them, but the good news is we've got that sort of Damocles. We've got provisions that Jerry Hill left us. If they go off track, we will take them over. So then I'll just close up with Marshall's other question. It's a good one. I mean, that's part of the struggle, right? It was the insurance companies that killed Bill and Hillary Clinton's, attempted healthcare reform back in '94, and they are very powerful. They haven't come after me yet, but maybe they don't think we're serious yet, which just shows we've got a long way to go. So I do have a friend, who had a company that was in healthcare, and he's trying to hire some people from Blue Shield. It's just so there's just tons of middle managers that make like $300,000 and they don't want to leave, and they just so we're certainly going to disrupt that if we change, but we'll have to do it, it's not going to be easy, but I do believe those are people that have skills and they'll be able to get jobs other places in our economy. But I don't know. We talk about just transition from oil. Maybe we'll talk about just transition from for-profit health insurance as well. Make sure
There we
they're
go.
employed. I'm not super worried about that employee base. I believe they have skills that they can get employed. So
And Medicare is going to need to hire them, and the HR 1976 bill in the House has a 5-year plan to retrain them. So it's
good.
being looked at and taken care of.
Yeah.
Well, given the unmet need for healthcare, there should be plenty more jobs available when people start to get the healthcare they need.
Medicare.
Yeah, they're talking about the insurance, though. You know, they're talking. Sorry, let me turn on the lights here. It's getting a little.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of administrative jobs in healthcare.
Yeah, you know, all those people.
There'll be less if we're all those people who are rejecting claims and fighting about claims, and all those people will be unemployed. But
they'll be screening your calls. Now you have to go through 3 layers.
Yeah. So but exactly. It's a big sector. I think they'll still be.
Yeah.
Josh, they're going to be working for Medicare. Medicare is going to expand to take care of all of us.
Yeah.
They'll need to be there to fill those jobs.
Yes.
Correct.
Although again, Medicare will be much more efficient than they are now. But yes, yeah. We'll
and it's still.
I mean, there's.
You have to go through 3 people. That's a lot of jobs.
Yeah. United Healthcare alone made $10 billion last year and about $9 billion the year before. So there'll be plenty of money to retrain people and get them jobs.
Folks, I'm super grateful for the time that we spent tonight, but unfortunately the senator has a phone call. He has to get to another appointment. And so I just wanted to point out that we're a little over time at this point.
Yes, and I just was going to say thank you so much, Senator Josh Becker, for joining us tonight. And let's hope this is the first of many times that you come and give us an update. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's the nice thing about Zoom. We can be together and have some of these extended conversations. We're not all, standing awkwardly at an event. And there's some pluses too. So there are no cookies. There's no cookies.
Yeah.
Oh, you'll get them tomorrow.
Maybe a hybrid one next time where we're in person and Zoom and best of both worlds. So thank you so much.
Okay. All right.
Thank
bye,
you so
everybody.
much.
And Josh, we want you to tell us when you need us to do something too.
Okay.
Yes.
Just keep that in mind.
Nicole and I will.
Great.
Thank you for that. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Good night.
All right.
Night.
Good night.
Night, Nicole.
All right.
Woo!
Well, that was just awesome.
Woo! We are so lucky.
We are. And I really loved, as I said, I really loved that one slide he had that showed the breakdown